Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this Sunday evening, and sorry for the little shift in our schedule, but we're so glad that you could join us here this evening.
Yes,
And
thank you.
yeah, this has been a busy week for Sarah and I,
It
and
really
so we've
has.
been shifting gears around here and getting ready for a really wonderful workshop with Melissa Dunning Weaver or Weaver Dunning.
We were done.
I always get those two turned around, but she's going to be doing a workshop for us on 18th century
Homewares,
homewares.
which is
So
kind of a neat topic.
yeah,
There's a lot that went on historically, in 18th century textiles. It would be impossible to cover it all, in
yeah,
one workshop, but specifically to homewares, things that they would have used around
things that you would love.
commonplace. Yeah.
We're talking about linens, we're
Mhm.
talking about rugs and carpeting, um, also blankets,
Yep.
and we're not going to be weaving jacquard things, but it all sort of relates all the way down into here. So
Right. Same sort of
and
time period that we're talking about.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we've moved on in history.
Yeah.
It is amazing to me, Sarah, on the progress that was made in the technology in such a short span of time.
Absolutely.
When you think about when Joseph Jacquard started getting this idea about the punch cards and how it took, maybe more than 100 years in our history to get to, Mr. Babbage and Ada and some of the other ones. But
That's right.
now look how quickly it's moving along.
It feels like we are doing warp speed ahead, literally, because
Oh, good pun.
Oh, yeah, wasn't that a great pun?
Yep.
So I feel like in this story timeline, we've gone from something that's taken 50, 60 years to sort of theorize something. Not
Yeah.
even in every case with some of the inventors we've looked at have we even seen ideas come to fruition.
Yeah.
But here in the 20th century, as we're moving into the electrified age, things are just going warp speed ahead. And tonight, we start out in chapter 13 talking about how IBM and Watson are just cleaning up the market as far as new technologies, their marketing strategies. We talked about some of their innovative techniques that they used with salesmen last year and some of those incentive programs. And he's ready to lay money out there to invest in other markets.
Yeah.
And we see that through some of the other acquisitions that he made with other companies. But probably the next big thing for Watson is getting to talk about Howard Aiken and him joining the force and collaborating with IBM.
Right. Wasn't he sort of a rip snorter kid too? I
He
mean, I love
was.
that beginning chapter where, I mean, his father was a bit of a drunkard. I mean, he was beating on
Sure.
Howard Aiken's mom, and this, very young man goes in there and he just beats the crap out of
Right,
his
and
dad.
says, "Get
Sends
out of
his
the
dad
house."
going,
Yeah.
and then it's like, uh-oh, now
Yeah.
I guess I'm the man of the house. Now what do I
Right.
do? And
Well, and he kind of got himself in trouble with that. Coming from an affluent family, the family basically came back and said, since you pushed him out of your life, you're no longer privy to all of the financial benefits that came
Right.
along with the marriage and
right.
this partnership. So, I mean, I love this portrait that I found of him of a younger man, and this could have been right before he entered his first round of college.
Yeah.
But you can see he has quite the character to him, and he looks very confident. And you can sort of see how he grew up to be the man that he was. It takes a certain personality,
A little poise.
a little poise,
Yeah, but yeah,
determination.
So determination,
Yeah.
and he worked hard to keep his mother in a style that she had become accustomed to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I really admire the man for that. Going to
Yeah.
school and working hard, and the people that also in his younger years that supported him in school and said, we're going to find you work and we're going to get you through school.
Yeah.
And what a great guy.
I think that we have been re-looking at this idea of right place, right time. And even for Jacquard himself,
Mhm.
being a pool boy at his
Yeah.
father's loom, set him up in a position to have an intimate knowledge of what the silk workers went through to sort of push his ideas towards these punch card systems. And other people we've looked at have either had financial means to be inventors by day.
Right.
But I think that Aikens falls into that same category. He was put in a position where just the right people, professors, noticed his skills and were able to sort of put him in positions of other companies, advocate for him because they knew he was going to make a difference in some way, shape, or form. If it wasn't in engineering, then in some other capacity.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm seeing some people sort of joining us here this evening. Hi, Patty and Robin. It's nice to see everybody joining us. As a reminder, we're talking here tonight about chapters 13 through 15, and it's
Hmm.
really the story of IBM and this partnership with Aiken to really sort of go back to what Babbage was working on, which was the analytical machine.
Hmm.
Remember, he never actually saw that come to fruition, but those ideas were there that it created complex calculations. It would do not only
Yeah.
horizontal but linear calculations and would sort of be an all encompassing fix it all for tabulations.
Yeah.
Um, and I think throughout the book, I went back and forth between does he give homage, does he not, depending on where he gives credit. Now, when he originally sort of partnered with IBM and put a proposal together for creating a similar type
Hmm.
machine, he gives a lot of credit to Jacquard. But down the road, when it actually comes to fruition, he's not mentioned at all.
No, no, he's just sort of forgotten in the
Yeah.
history books.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Aiken did a
I
pretty
think,
marvelous job,
yeah, I
and then the
think so
people coming
too.
out of that.
Yeah. Now, when you talk about this invention and what their goals were here, it was really to speed things up. We were living in a very fast world,
Hmm.
and not having equipment available to us that would allow us to exceed in other sciences. Think about when they started back in Babbage's time, and he was aiding astronomers
That's
to
right.
do complex calculations for distance out in space. It would have been at a standstill, and I'm sort of trying to put this in my own perspective because I was born in the early to mid 80s. I've never known a world where there wasn't an inexpensive plastic calculator at my disposal
Yeah.
for next to nothing. But people that I have in my close periphery within their lifetimes, that was not a possibility. And the 30s it wasn't even like 100 years ago. It wasn't possible at all.
That's right.
And to me that's just absolutely amazing.
I was sharing with Sarah earlier today that I had a classmate of mine had received a Texas Instrument calculator as his main Christmas present,
Yeah.
and we were all so jealous of him because I mean, here is this amazing thing, in the 1970s. This was
Mhm.
hundreds of dollars. What an extravagant gift.
Right.
And also, the whole idea of these, a little punch. I can remember my dad working in the office on his books, and I can hear that adding machine, da, 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 and da, 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 and this paper coming out. And now, my gosh, I'm doing my calculations for class on my cell phone.
Yeah, we were joking about this on the way here, actually, that all of this started with tabulation machines, being able to add things up. And now we've got something like a computer where the calculator is just a sub app program that's
Oh,
sort of like an extra add-on bonus thing
right.
for it.
Yeah.
It's so funny,
It-
like what we use and the power we have at our hands with our modern computers.
And if I could bring your grandfather back
Oh
and
my
let him
gosh.
see a cell phone and what it does, I mean, he's been gone for 30 years. He would absolutely not recognize.
No.
And it's such a short period of time, everybody.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I mean, my children will never know a world without
No.
modern conveniences
No.
such as these. Now, when the Mark I came to fruition, there was a little bit of a kerfuffle with IBM in the naming of it. They had the idea that it should be the automatic sequence controlled calculator. Has such a nice ring to it, right? And would look great in any catalog of theirs.
Except I would have forgotten the name of it 10 minutes from now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a little bit like how car dealerships will, call it the Q5 or the Q4 or whatever in there.
Yeah.
Here, this is, or the 400.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. Now, the thing that I love about Essinger's description of this is that when this came about, it was this marvel that it actually happened because, first of all, they're doing all of this also in the middle of a war. Funding is down.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
not really a government project because they're not quite sure how they'll use it to their advantage, but they're pretty sure it's going to be helpful. And so getting the right man on the job was difficult. But when it came to fruition, it was this amazing thing. And when they described it as being 51 feet long,
Holy
I
cow.
immediately started Googling because I needed to get a visual for it. And when it started talking about some of the inner workings of it
Oh
and
my
how much
goodness.
wire was serpentining through it, I think at one point it was quoted in the book as having like 3 million wire connections within it. It absolutely blew my mind. And, I went on and tried to do a little bit more research in regards to um, how how this all sort of came together, and I found this wonderful website that I hope each of you will get a chance to enjoy. But this gives actually some nice color photographs of what it would have looked like, gives some additional really fun facts about it, and basically goes through the history of its use and eventually its decommissioning, as well as more people that were a part of the project. Now, I have to tell you, this is a really cool website, but it is one that
It's
was
interesting.
US based. So when
Yeah.
it first comes up, especially in Chrome, make sure that you take the time to have it translate so that you can enjoy
Yeah.
it versus in the Hindi original version. um, but what I love so much about that is it gives a visual for me of all of those complex calculations, what that looked like. And when they described the speed of which it was happening, 100 times faster than a human, yet it would work all
All the
night
same
long for hours and
for
hours and
hours and
hours.
hours.
But it's a start point, right? We have to start somewhere,
Yeah.
and we work up from there. I also found it interesting after the sort of kerfuffle with the naming and Aiken's sort of lack of recognition of IBM's sort of contributions, not only financially, but putting other team members in place, giving them the right tools and
Hmm.
materials. IBM was kind of pissed about this.
Well, you can almost understand.
Yeah.
But oh my gosh, during these war times and how everything was just so um, tight. I mean, there wasn't money. These companies were making money. I like
Oh,
their
yeah.
business practice also.
Yeah.
Again, it just made me sort of think. I mean, they're talking about these machines, and the government goes, well, we just don't want to buy these.
Yeah.
Can we rent them because we only need it for a short period of time,
Sure.
especially with, the
The
census
censuses.
and things
Yeah.
like that.
Makes
I
sense.
can remember years ago,
Mhm.
we rented a Xerox machine at the Manning's Hand Weaving
Mhm.
School. And I mean, to buy one was so expensive, but we were renting that. And
Mhm.
over the years and years and years, and buying the paper for the Xerox
Yeah.
machine too. I mean, we could have bought one.
Yeah.
Now, I was thinking, gosh, if I want a copier, I just go down to Best Buy or
And just buy
Walmart,
one.
and I
Yeah.
just buy one
Yeah.
for a little bit of nothing.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that was sort of ingenious. Let's just
Yeah.
rent these out to
Let's
people
rent it out.
and then sell them paper.
I did find it interesting as I sort of did some looking around. I went directly to IBM's website because most they tend to put like a history of the company, and IBM was nice enough to put an entire timeline. So I started looking to the 1930s and 1940s, and what I found was there is absolute documentation here of the automatic sequence
Oh,
machine,
my
as well
gosh.
as the fact that it was also called the Mark I, and that it was after 6 years of development with Harvard University.
Mhm.
Aiken's is not once mentioned on the website as being the head lead of the project. And I mean, it's a bit of a snuff, just like we said, was what their goal was. But at the same time, it was interesting to see that they had not actually given him much credit for it. However, the National Inventors Hall of Fame does give Howard Aiken full credit for the automatic sequence controller machine. So it's nice to see that he has been remembered in history,
Yeah.
even if IBM was not so nice to sort of
Include him.
include him in that. But I guess it goes both ways. But as we record history, we have to remember that it cannot remain biased necessarily.
Mhm.
And yes, he was a staff member of Harvard University, but I kind of feel like they should include his name in
I
there on the
agree.
project a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Since he contributed so much.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say so. Now, if you're looking for a little bit more information on the Mark One, I also found that on Harvard's website, they have a wonderful YouTube video that you can go and visit, as well as sort of a rundown. So in the book, they listed that part of the Mark One is at the Smithsonian Institute in
Mhm.
Washington, D.C., but Harvard University actually also has part of it housed at their facilities as well. So for those of you here in sort of our mid-Atlantic region, either of those would be drivable distance if you actually wanted to go and
We could
see
go
it in
actually
person.
and see it in operation.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly. Yeah. So, or you can watch the video that we'll include in the chat section here this evening.
Aren't you glad you don't have a 50-foot long laptop to just send your emails?
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly. Now, we sort of had an extra special day today, knowing we were getting ready to discuss this, and we have stuff to celebrate. Jacquard has been a really big discussion for us, and I feel like now that we're talking about the book, it's coming up a lot more
Yeah.
around the tables at lunchtime, and we're just getting a lot more emails coming in about it. But today, I actually got all of our volunteers together, and we took a 12-passenger van out to Bedford to visit the National Coverlet
It
Museum.
was marvelous.
It
folks.
was awesome. And our volunteers, for many of them, this was the first time that they had actually been out to the Coverlet Museum. And Dad, the Coverlet Museum is near and dear to you because you've been a collector for many, many years. And so this was a nice opportunity for you to just have one-on-one time.
Oh,
We had the entire museum to ourselves.
it was
They opened up before hours for us, which was so, so generous. But we got to sort of give ourselves our own self-guided
Yeah.
tour based on what our interest levels were for that week. And so Melissa Zonger, of course, was there, and she was answering lots and lots of questions.
so knowledgeable.
So
oh my goodness, and
knowledgeable.
so generous with her.
Yes, I really
Oh.
appreciate everything that she did for us today in sort of hosting us. While we were there at the museum, we were specifically interested in some of the coverlets that were Jacquard woven.
And here you can see some of the more fanciful coverlets and the complexity of this. This picture that we're looking at on the right-hand side is a double weave. And it was interesting to sort of stand back and listen to the volunteers ask questions about this. And one of them came up and said, "Oh, how many shafts would you have to have on your loom to do that?"
Right.
And the answer is literally hundreds of them.
Right.
Because every little block, if we could pixelate that and blow it up, and you realize that every little pattern block in there is controlled with its own separate little heddle and lingo giving weight to that. It's phenomenal. And so all of a sudden, those punch cards that we just have laying around here for fun is sort of like little objet d'art, as they say.
Yeah.
It made so much more sense to them.
Yeah.
So,
But the
yeah.
objet d'art that he's referring to are these cards that we have back here. all book club, we've had them here. Now, as we went around the museum, in addition to being able to see some of the coverlets that were up on the wall, we got to see some amazing equipment. And I had to include this photo because, I mean, you've been collecting most of your life, which means
Yeah.
they've been in my periphery my entire life. I came around the corner and saw this particular piece, and my eyeballs just about came out of my head because it looked like op art to me.
It's so contemporary and so modern, and yet I'm guessing this is probably from the 1850s, 1860s.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And it was just really, really fun to look at it. Now, as we sort of went into the next room, this is where I started getting the heavy
Woohoo!
inhale breathing. As we could see here, this is a Jacquard Head.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, do you remember this one if it had a date on it? I forgot to note that.
You know what, Sarah? I don't remember. But if you can imagine, this was sitting on top of one of these large barn frame looms, and I mean the switch of gears in your mind from being a professional weaver and having one type of loom and then switching over to this new technology.
Yeah.
And just as we were talking about modern technology and how quickly it developed, this really came into sort of fruition like 1801, I remember Melinda saying. And when we're looking at these covers, I'm thinking 1822, 1834. These weavers are out there and they are buying this Jacquard head, sticking it on their loom, and they're weaving coverlets that nobody has seen before,
Yeah, yeah.
pattern-wise. And that is such a short period of time.
It totally is. Yeah.
And the learning curve that they had to go through to
Yeah.
get that is pretty exciting.
Yeah. Now, it's very unlikely that we would find an intact Jacquard Head as well as the cards that went along with it. But the nice thing is that the museum had, not only sitting at the loom in the back there, examples of cards that were used at the family heirloom
Yeah.
weavers in Red Lion, but they also had some other interesting examples of cards down on the floor that may have come out of factories in more modern applications. And it was interesting to see this particular set of cards because they were so fine, but it's neat to be able to see their system where they had black dots and then the punched out holes afterwards. Um, yeah, I thought that was really, I'm not sure what that one would have been used to have made. It certainly didn't go with this loom, but the fineness of it is really interesting.
You know what? I am so sorry I passed by that.
That's
I was on,
okay.
but I think I'm going back in May
Yes.
to visit the museum again when
Yeah.
the collection changes.
Yes.
Um,
And I'll put lots of information in the chat box about the Coverlet Museum. If you are here in the Pennsylvania area, it is totally worth going. Now, you can sort of see right here in the lower left corner is the Jacquard Head, and just beyond it was a coverlet like none I have ever seen before.
it was just
What about
beautiful.
you?
No. I'm very familiar with the type that you see
Yeah.
on the right hand side, but this was so complex in its design and patterning.
Yep.
It's just
In fact, our volunteers just all sort of hovered around it, and Melinda gave us a little history about the weaver who actually wove it. On the left hand side, this is a detail of like one section going up. And I love these sort of like lozenge shapes. And
Mhm.
from a distance, it reminded me of like Chinese pottery,
It does.
right? Or
I thought
or Chinese vase or something.
yeah.
But when you get closer and you look at the details, it almost looks like carpeting that could be gone on the floor in the approach to the patterning. But this was actually a Scottish-born weaver. They're not really quite sure where he's from,
Mhm.
but there's sort of like a hypothesis. But the fineness of his work and the detail of the images on here is unbelievable. If you have a chance to see it in person, I highly recommend it.
Can you take a look at that border, everybody, and
Mhm.
sort of guess why we think it was Scottish? Do you see the thistle?
Yeah,
Yeah, you're not going to find that in a Pennsylvania German coverlet. You're going to find distal finks, and you're
that's
going to
right.
find hearts and tulips, but
Yeah.
there's a thistle in there.
There's also in the lower right hand corner where we'd like think of like the cartouche bead
Mhm.
is they had two lions with a crown in the center as well, which sort of
Very
had a
sort
lot of
of
Scottish,
yeah.
sort of feel to it. But you know what? We had like the best time, and like getting upstairs to look at some of the samples was just awesome for me. When you go into the sample room, if you're ever invited up there, it's a very special place. They have everything cataloged and organized very well. And for some of the pieces that are lucky enough, they're in archival safe boxes and well documented. It is the hope of the museum through donations that eventually the entire collection will take this, but it takes a lot of effort from people like ours in the
Mhm.
community to say, yes, I'll donate some money so you can buy the things that aren't fun, so to protect this forever. And the collection is such that I think that she said they have well over 1,000 coverlets now
Exactly.
at this
Yeah.
point, which is so
The
cool.
museum's been open for 16 years, and during that time,
Yeah.
they've just acquired more coverlets and more coverlets, and it's amazing. People who have been collectors, like myself,
Mhm.
I don't have 150 coverlets, but
No.
there have been very generous people who have taken this seriously and donated an entire collection
Mhm.
to them.
That's exactly
And
right.
oh my gosh, when we went up there into that room and walked in there to see that, it was like, oh my gosh, I don't take nitroglycerin tablets, but I thought my heart was going to just jump out my chest. It is just so beautiful to see those coverlets. And Melinda is so generous. Would
She
you like
is.
to see this? So I saw somebody was asking, what museum? This is the National Coverlet Museum in Bedford, Pennsylvania. And it is only a few miles off of the Bedford exit off of the Pennsylvania Turnpike.
Yep.
Please go and visit this summer as you're vacationing, because as a weaver, you would so thoroughly enjoy it.
Yeah. I think you and I too sort of like have a soft spot for this place because they have all the cool things that we like to look at. They have not only the coverlets, but they also have the tools there as well. one of the volunteers called me over because in one of the back rooms, they have a wonderful display about the history of flax processing,
Yeah.
everything from the plant to the final, and some nice examples of the spinning wheels. They have some examples of like feed bags that would have been made out of the
Yeah.
various sizes. And so it's much more inclusive with the tools and the stories attached to it. And it's just in a really cool building as well. It's a really old schoolhouse, not schoolhouse, but it looks like a high school. It's huge.
Yeah, it's an
inside.
old high school,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah.
And it's a good place for your own collections to be on display.
It is.
Yeah, a number of years ago, Tom decided to have on permanent loan down there at the museum some of the wonderful barn frame looms that he's collected over the years. And some of the ones that we were looking at today, it was neat for you to see them assembled, warps on, and something woven on them.
It was just fantastic. Some of you might remember I did an article for Hand Woven about my collecting and things coming in, and it's like the Hotel California. It comes in, but you're never going to leave. Well, I've been collecting, and there was one particular loom that I bought from the Baltimore Museum of Fine Arts. They did not find a barn frame loom as fine art. It did not compete the same with the Jackson Pollock or the Rothkos upstairs. And so I bought it, and I was so excited because this was the only barn frame loom, folks, that I had ever come across that had 6 shafts on it. 6.
Yeah.
And so usually it's 4 or it's 2, but no, this was a professional weaver's loom. And so volunteers have gone in and they've cleaned it up and they've assembled it, and it is up and running, and you can go and see the beautiful twill pattern that's been put on, a 6-shaft twill pattern, and it just made my heart happy. But I'm going to make you feel okay, maybe a little embarrassed at this point, but Sarah was going off and telling somebody all about the flax processing and everything, and Melinda looked at me and she winked, and I said, "Yep, she's got it." Yeah, you're just
That's nice.
It's wonderful. See the next generation coming along. So
yeah. Well, Melinda
cheers.
and Laszlo have done an amazing job at creating a space where I could go get a whole bunch of people right around a Jacquard head. We could get underneath. We could look at all the components and the little weights attached to it. And everything became so much clearer at that point because we had a space like the Coverlet Museum to go and explore. Yeah.
So really, I mean, maybe don't take your family members. Just load up the car or van.
Don't take your family.
With people who really care about these things and just have a wonderful afternoon. And the town of Bedford is just so picturesque, and there's just so many cool things going on there, little boutiques and things like that. The town is just picturesque and lovely. And we had a nice lunch afterwards. We made a perfect day out of it.
We had a nice farm-to-table restaurant, good meal, good company. And, we have some other shares here. There's also a Coverlet Museum in St. Vincent College in Latrobe, PA, too.
I did not know that.
Well, there we go. We'll have to add that on our list for exploration and see what they're all about. If you can include in the chat section any more information you know about it, what their theme is, or because the National Coverlet Museum, their goal is really to talk about coverlets that were happening beyond just like what we know here in central Pennsylvania, all the way down into southern Appalachia, up into northern parts of New England. And I have to regress to show some pictures from my favorite part of the museum today.
What is that?
Actually, you brought it to my attention. So this is a lovely example of what we might refer to as a boutonnet coverlet.
Very sure. Hello. I'll be right back.
Okay. So this is an example of boutonnet, and that term is really more widely sort of recognized in the St. Lawrence River Valley area of Canada. And what's wonderful about these is that they were woven just as fancy, just as graphic as some of the coverlets that we were seeing south of the Canadian border here in the States, but with only 2 harnesses. And what I love about this is you can see the plain weave ground of cotton, but all of the dark blue bumps that you see brought to the surface are made by pulling weft material up to create physical space. Now, this particular maker I found extremely interesting. Number one, because she is a female.
Correct.
Right? So this was woven in 1841, and this woman, Mary Lighton, she was from, I believe, was it Rhode Island or New Hampshire?
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire.
Yeah.
She wove several hundred of these. In fact, this is number 113, and they were all identical to each other. She did not veer from this patterning at all, which I think is pretty cool.
Melinda was saying there's quite
me.
a bit of documentation going on with this.
Yeah.
That they know how many, and she did it for family and friends, and she,
yeah.
oh my God, it was just beautiful.
Yeah. Now, I got particularly excited about this because this is something I've explored with my rigid heddle students, and this is actually a piece that I designed to sort of highlight that technique.
I'm going to see if I can get it
for
closer
those
so
folks,
you can see the little loops
Ooh la la.
in there. Yeah.
Yeah. And this was just fun because it really hit home to folks how creative you can get with limited resources. You know, we're talking about 2 harnesses or rigid heddle, which is the complete opposite end of the spectrum of what we've been discussing with Jacquard, which is how complex can we get it. And what was cool is that we had a group of weavers around us, and we all had a great appreciation for both styles.
It's true. Yeah. We had a wonderful day. So please go out and visit. And they are open 7 days a week, on Sundays even from noontime until 4. But most days, I think it was 10 to 5. And
exactly.
Yep.
Now, next week is week 6, believe it or not. And next week is Wednesday because we had to push back because of some illness this week. Our final wrap up will actually only be in a few days. It is my hope that you guys are really thoroughly enjoying this. Next week, we're in our modern era. We are in the digital age. We're moving past the analog age, and we're going to wrap up this book to where we are currently. We don't know where we're going to be in the future. Jacquard certainly didn't know where we were going to be 80 years past where he had put us. But I'm excited to wrap it up. And
I'm sure there's a number of you folks out there who are weaving on looms today that are computer interfaced. And it would be nice to see your comments coming up here.
Feel free to put pictures of your looms in the comments box. If you have a AVL loom or you have something with a computer-assisted attachment to it, show us what you're weaving on. This is a great forum to share just those kind of things. Brag away. Yeah.
It was great.
Well, thank you, everyone. It has been so much fun, and we always enjoy being here with you. We'll see you on Wednesday evening at 7 p.m.
Good night.